We will call the November 26th meeting of the Caroline County Board of Supervisors to order. Let the record state that all board members are here. Mr. Black representing Western Caroline, Mr. Seeley representing Bowling Green, Mr. Underwood representing Reedy Church, Mr. Akers representing Madison, Mr. Taylor representing Port Royal, and I'm Floyd Thomas representing Mattapanat. I've asked Mr. Taylor to give us the invocation, and then we'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance.
If we could stand, please. Heavenly Father, we come to Thee at this hour thanking Thee for the blessings that Thou hast given us. We ask a special blessing upon all of the citizens of Caroline County, and we ask that this board might be able to do what it needs to do to supply the needs of these individuals. We ask for wisdom and guidance, and in all instances we will be sure to give You the praise for all the success we have. These and all the blessings we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, I see Mr. Dillon there. Okay, Mr. Parton, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, if we could pull item 9 from the agenda, the Columbia Gas right-of-way needs some additional work, and we would ask that that be pulled from the agenda.
Okay. That's it. All right, no other changes. We'll just pull agenda item number 9. Opening board comments, Mr. Black?
None.
Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Chairman, want to remind all the folks of the Senior Citizens Gala, which is always a great event to get the word out to folks that may be eligible that may not realize that that goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's when? Next Thursday?
Next Thursday, the 5th of December.
All right, at 7 o'clock?
I think it's 6 o'clock
6 o'clock at the high school.
at the high school.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Underwood?
No, at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Akers?
Not at this time.
Mr. Taylor?
I have none.
Okay, we will move on then. Presentations, update from State Fair. I saw Mr. Dillon walk in. Mr. Dillon, good to see you as always.
Thank you, gentlemen. I apologize for my tire. It's been a hectic day, and the rain didn't let me stop at home to put a suit and tie on, so no offense. I do recognize the importance of the occasion, so my dress doesn't reflect that. I wanted a chance to give you a brief update on what we're doing at the Meadow Event Park so that you kind of bring you up to speed, what we're doing, what we're planning. We have a very exciting 2014 planned, good for us, good for the county, we believe. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what those events are. First of all, starting in January, we have a full slate of events at the Meadow. These are facility rentals at the Farm Bureau Center where people bring in shows. Every weekend is a new show at the Meadow starting in January. February, 2 weekends are booked solid as well. March, the entire Farm Bureau Center is booked for the entire month. April is a little bit of a slower month, but we begin the horse shows. We expect to have 12 to 14 horse shows at the Equestrian Center in 2014, starting in April. May, if you listen to K95 radio, you will hear an announcement. I'm sorry, that's June. In May, we have a new event that we are putting together. It is the Mid-Atlantic Hot Air Balloon Festival. We expect to have 25 hot air balloons for the 3-day event. We expect to have, for the first year, 10,000 people attend the event. We will have food sponsors. We will have other vendors, so we will see some tax revenue for the county at this event. We expect that event to grow bigger as the years go on. We would like to see upwards of 20,000 people eventually at that event. The June again is busy with other events, but if you listen to K95 radio this morning, they announced that we are bringing K95 Country Fest to the Meadow beginning June 28th of 2014. Again, we expect to have 10,000 people at that event also. And then there's some other events. Another event in June, which you can register for if you'd like, is the Tough Mudder event. For those of you who aren't as familiar with that as or as familiar as I was before we signed it, I didn't know what it was. We expect to have, again, 7,000 to 8,000 people who desire to run through the mud, climb over hurdles, and get real dirty at that event. That should attract people from the entire Mid-Atlantic area to that event. That's not sponsored by us. We are renting the facility to the Tough Mudder organization for that event. That is followed in 2015 by a companion event, so that's the following year, Mudderella. So Tough Mudder for the men, Mudderella for the women, if they so desire. July is a busy month, but we don't have any big events. August is, trying to think what we have in August. We have a couple of major events by other people, but not as big as those. September is the State Fair. Right after the State Fair next year, we will have a Bluegrass Festival at the Meadow. So if you're chronologically, we will close the fair down in early October. We will go right into a Bluegrass Festival immediately after that. Immediately after that, we will have the Equine Extravaganza in early November, and then introducing next year, we'll begin setting up in October, but we will start working the show in mid-November, a holiday light show, which will be a major event. It's a drive-through light show. We expect to have 10,000 cars come through in the first year. That will be coupled with a holiday village, so people can drive through the light show. It'll be a state-of-the-art light show. It's produced in Nashville right now. We work with the people promoting it. We have a joint sponsorship where we will be having it here at the Meadow. We'll have a Christmas village with that. 10,000 cars should equate to about 25,000 to 30,000 people during that 6-week period beginning in mid-November. We have more events that we're planning for 2015, but that's the 2014 calendar of what we're doing. So we expect a very busy year. We appreciate all the effort that we're getting from everybody on staff and the Board of Supervisors as we put these events together. We couldn't really do it without everybody involved. That's my quick update. I was told I had 5 minutes. I'm probably in under that, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I didn't say you had 5 minutes, but great job. We appreciate the things you've done. You have an attendance update on the State Fair? I think we talked about it before.
229,000 people at the State Fair this year.
Okay.
Is the attendance. We, as you know, we had 10 days of great weather. We asked for that, and we were given that. And we didn't pay any extra for that, though. We were very happy with the 229,000. As you know, it's been reported in past years that have greater attendance, and so from that perspective, we weren't as pleased with 229,000 as we might think we were. One thing we do recognize, though, even with 229,000 attendees at the fair, we really did run tight on parking. There was a couple. The first Saturday was nip and tuck on parking. We probably went to 85% of capacity on that first Saturday. With the entertainment acts we had booked for the following Saturday and Sunday, we were really very concerned that we were going to run out of parking. We did have some contingency plans. We didn't do that, though. But I think in the future we would like to see the fair grow beyond the 229,000 level given good weather. And parking and availability of places to put cars is one of our concerns.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Dillon, at this time? Mr. Black? Ms. Seeley?
I will say that I heard nothing but compliments for the arrangement of the fair this year with moving the little kid stuff up on top of the hill. Everybody seemed to really like that with food up there. So at least from the feedback I got, I think that was a great move, and just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you. Which kind of leads me to go back beyond my 5-minute mark, maybe to 6 minutes, and that's to add another comment. As you can tell, we are very busy planning and trying to find those events and those things that will bring people to the Meadow for various, and which we've said is good for the county and is good for us. As we look to the future, Mr. Fincham's group has been very good about telling us we need to be mindful of the proffers and of the zoning and the special exemptions at the Meadow. And we certainly, as I've said, want to be good neighbors, and we're not going to do anything that are in violation. But to Mr. Fincham's staff credit, they told us, as you plan and think and get creative, let us know so that we can make sure you're not in violation. And ideally, they'd like us to tell them well in advance, what are you going to be doing? And honestly, in this business, we don't know that far in advance what the next big thing to do is going to be. So a little bit of a heads up that we may be coming back to this group at times to ask for zoning changes, proffer changes, things that are all in good keeping with our intent to be good neighbors. But as the proffers were created and developed, maybe didn't anticipate some of the things that need to be done or where things need to be located. So just a kind of a heads up and along those lines.
Mr. Underwood?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Akers? Mr. Allen?
Just one question. You talked about attendance, and maybe you said this, but how did the attendance compare with previous years as far as the numbers?
Sure. The attendance in 2012, which was the year right after the bankruptcy, was around 160,000 people. Keep in mind just that when we report attendance, there's a number of people, and this is in the industry, the number of people who come to the fair is different than the number of people who pay to come to the fair. So when the fair attendance gets reported, we reported 160,000 last year. There was less than that actually paid to come through the gate. This year, as I said, we reported 229,000. Some of those folks didn't pay to come through the gate. They may have been vendors. They may have been people that we gave complimentary tickets to, so forth. In past years, the numbers reported were as high as 260,000 people attending the fair. That's why I shared with you the fact that we really ran very tight on parking, and so to hit the 260,000 attendee number for us gives us some concern with parking, but it would be our goal to hit. We think that this fair, logistics allowing, can hit the 260 to 300,000 attendee mark given good weather and conditions. It's that good of a fair, we think.
Thank you.
Mr. Dillon, all of the things you mentioned as far as your calendar are on the Meadow event website.
I believe they are all on the site. Don't hold me to that, Mr. Chairman, though, because I know the K95, for example, was something we were trying to hold tight to the vest.
It's there.
Okay. The Bluegrass Festival, I believe, is there. The Holiday Light Show, I don't believe, is there yet.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, it's closed, so the folks that are here, you can at least check that.
It is. And we are I was just talking to staff on the way up here, and we are going to be very diligent now about getting together with Mr. Fincham's group to make sure they know what's on the calendar and that we are, again, working with those proffers and those zoning regulations so that we do stay compliant.
Okay. I think that's it, Mr. Dillon. We appreciate you coming. We appreciate all the things you've done for the county. Thanks for letting us participate in the dedication for the Trooper, too. So if there's anything we can do, we'll look forward to you coming back and seeing how we can work through that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next presentation would be from PRTC, from the VRE chief, Mr. Allen, and Mr. Harf. If you gentlemen would like to both come forward, or Mr. Harf, you want to wait for him to go first and then you could come? We're really just, at this point in time, looking at the benefits, and I think Mr. Allen and I met a couple of months ago, seems like now, but to kind of brief the entire board on the benefits of being part of PRTC and the responsibilities of being part of PRTC. So that's kind of the way we're looking at it. We really appreciate you being here, so the floor is yours.
Pleasure to appear before you this evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Caroline Board. Let me say at the outset that neither I nor Mr. Allen are here on a sales mission. We don't have something that we're seeking to sell. We recognize that the Caroline Board needs to decide whether or not it is in its own self-interest to participate We think that there are definite virtues to participation. We also think that it's important that in considering that question, both the Caroline Board and the existing member governments need to assess whether it's in their respective self-interest for that participation to occur. So I did want to say at the outset that we're not here on a sales mission. Both the PRTC Board and the VRE Operations Board have knowledge of Caroline's interest in exploring the subject, and our marching orders, if you will, were to engage the Caroline Board in a dialogue, answer what questions you have, and then be in the position to have you make a more informed judgment.
Thank you very much.
And I will say that you have been very well served. This might be an evening where Mr. Fincham winds up having to take multiple bows for having served the Caroline County Board as well as he has. I'm aware of the communications that he has furnished to the Caroline Board. He has told you the straight skinny about what the implications of membership are, including the fact that all of the PRTC members do have a 2.1% motor fuels tax levied on all of the fuel sales that occur within the jurisdiction, and that, I suppose, depending on your point of view, is both a blessing and a liability. I will say that the 2.1% motor fuels tax, by virtue of PRTC's founding ordinance, are monies that can be used for any qualifying transportation purpose that the jurisdiction sees fit to use it for. And there are multiple instances of PRTC member jurisdictions using the 2.1% motor fuels tax revenue for a variety of transportation purposes that are meaningful to the jurisdiction, in addition to the contributions that they make for the transit services that they collectively sponsor. Let me introduce Mr. Allen so that he can make some opening remarks, and then the two of us are available to answer what questions you might have.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening. I'm Doug Allen. I'm the CEO for the Virginia Railway Express. We appreciate very much being down here and your interest and your expression of some interest, perhaps, in being a part of what we do. VRE has about a 90-mile commuter rail system. We have 2 lines from Manassas and 1 from Fredericksburg. We're about to extend down into Spotsylvania County within the year, about an 8 or 9 mile extension down into Spotsylvania. It'll be at the near Highway 17. So access, right now we get riders from Caroline County, not a great number, but I'd say about 100 or so riders a day. And when we open up down in Spotsylvania County, we anticipate that more riders from Caroline County will be able to use the services because it's going to be a lot more convenient to get to than the station in downtown Fredericksburg. The way we're set up, we are owned by the 2 transportation commissions, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which is Fairfax County and north, and the Potomac-Rappahannock Transportation Commission that Al Harf is the executive director of, which is Prince William County south, including includes Stafford and Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania County. So how we're set up is we have an agreement that all of the jurisdictions have entered into that defines how we do our business and where the costs are coming from. Largely we're set up that 40% of all of our costs are paid for by the riders, so it's very user supported. Another 40% generally comes from state and federal grants, primarily for capital purchases. And then the remaining 20% is divided up amongst the local jurisdictions that are a member of the Virginia Railway Express. We have an operations board that's made up of members from both commissions based on the percentage of riders that are coming from those various jurisdictions. So as we develop our budget, we present that to our operations board, which again are representatives of the 2 different commissions, as well as members of the jurisdictions that are a member of VRE. And at that point, we lay out what the budget is, what the projects are, what the service is going to be, and then what their annual subsidy payment would be based on what our projections are for ridership. Some of the, as we've talked about this in general with our board, some of the issues that have come up is the payment of the annual subsidy, again, based on ridership. We also have a need occasionally to issue bonds, and that's pretty much needs a it does have a requirement of unanimous approval of the jurisdictions to issue bonds because it's pledging the full faith and credit of all of our member jurisdictions collectively. The prospects for rail coming this far south, what I talked to staff about 6 months ago now was some prospects perhaps of the Carmel Church area, which has a lot of potential. It's a large, very accessible, interesting location. The challenge from a commuter rail standpoint is pretty far away from where we currently serve and where we're about to serve. The distance, again, as a commuter rail system, our intent is mostly to take people from the outlying areas into the District of Columbia and the areas like Arlington and Alexandria as well. And the distance becomes pretty long, about 80 miles, which is on the very far edges of what commuter rail can really do effectively. So there'd be somewhat of a challenge associated with that. Those are technical issues, so we've expressed that to the staff, but what we're interested in is answering your questions tonight, and we wanted to give you a full overview of what we are and how we're set up, and then Al and I are here to answer whatever questions you have and see if we can shed some light on it.
Okay. Well, since you're here now, let me ask a couple of quick ones. The Spotsylvania expansion is an additional 8 miles, you said?
Yes, sir.
Who's paying for that, and how much did it cost?
It's a combination. I want to say it's about a $33 million rail project, and it includes adding a third track to the CSX's railroad. That provides a lot of extra capacity to the CSX railroad. We have a long-term commitment to them, by the way, of building that third track on their entire line from Spotsylvania all the way into Washington, D.C. And we're doing that incrementally over time. But that project is, that's the track project, and then Spotsylvania County is funding, again, using some state grants and some federal grants, building the station and a 1,500-car parking lot. The track project is funded with state grants and then what we call system costs. And the system costs are all of the jurisdictions collectively, again, based on their proportionate share of ridership, pay a percentage of that project. And so anything that's a systems cost, which typically is a rail car that's used throughout the whole system, track infrastructure is a systems cost. So based on, if Caroline County were to join, based on the ridership, it'd be your share would be defined by how many riders were coming from Caroline County relative to the rest of the jurisdictions, and that percentage would be your responsibility in paying on that particular track project.
Okay. And that's riders, not rider miles. So
Riders.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if we have 1,000 riders, even though we're riding the longest distance, that counts the same as somebody who gets on in Fairfax and just goes to D.C.?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned bonds. What bonds are out there now?
We are about to pay off all of the bonds that we have outstanding, but they were to purchase rail cars and locomotives. Okay. And so those bonds are going away. Again, that was a systems cost. And because we wanted to purchase a lot of the vehicles to get a new fleet, which we're very fortunate we have virtually a new fleet, that bonds were taken out to be able to accelerate that, but they're about to be paid off.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Black?
I think I want to take this maybe a little bit backwards. When I was looking at this a little bit I'm trying to take it from the counties north of us, their perspective.
Yes.
Okay. So eventually over time, let's say 20 years down the road, that there's a need for a train station in, say, Carmel Church. Okay. And you said it's based on ridership. Right now, what we've got from staff is an official count of about 86 riders, Caroline riders.
That's right.
That's about accurate. Okay, so if that was the case, then that would mean the brunt of any sort of track construction would be done, if I'm hearing you correctly, would actually be borne by the counties north of us, correct?
If we were to follow the standard procedure on a project like this, that's why I was kind of prefacing the comments that the distance from Spotsylvania to the Carmel Church is unique, And in reality, it'd probably be a unique funding arrangement. Probably wouldn't be the same type of arrangement that we have for track improvements on the existing sections that we operate on. So probably what we'd be looking at is that Caroline County would if we could get CSX to agree to do it, Caroline County probably would be, along with if we get state grants, would be bearing the cost of that track work.
And do you have, and so that brings up, because I can imagine that, you know, the counties north of us, Prince William, Spotsylvania, aren't going to want to pay to, I don't know how many miles it would be from Spotsylvania to
20.
20 miles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would imagine they're not going to want to fund Caroline County, you know, 20 miles. And that brings up, has there been some discussion, and it brings up two questions for me. Number one, I mean, just off the top of your head, would you have a cost? Would you have a cost estimate on that?
No, I haven't put anything together.
Is that something that you could put together for us as far as a cost estimate is concerned?
We probably could put together a rough order of magnitude. Let me highlight some of the challenges associated with it. One is it is a privately owned railroad. CSX operates freight trains on it. We haven't had any discussions with them of what they would be expecting to allow passenger trains other than Amtrak, which is required. They're required to take Amtrak trains. So we haven't had any discussions with them. We'd have to make some assumptions, some broad assumptions. It's very likely it would require a third track to be built, and we could put a cost estimate together on that if you'd like.
Yeah.
But those are the types of things that you'd be looking at is spending serious dollars to add a third track and the bridges that go along with it and the signalization that goes along with it to get it down this far.
So, Jeff, is it fair to say if 8 miles cost $33 million, we'd probably be in the $99 million for 20 miles?
Today's cost.
There's a lot of special track work, and not to get into too much detail, a lot of special track work and systems, signals that are embedded in that short section, so it probably wouldn't be a direct comparison.
Okay.
But I can, if you'd like me to, I can work with your staff and provide you with a rough, at least a range of what the cost might be. Again, all that's prefaced with, we've not talked to the CSX about the potential of this and what they may be looking at, but it might give you an order of magnitude, if that would be helpful.
Right, and what has, just out of curiosity, since I'm going to stay on that with kind of looking at it from their perspective, what has been from the boards, PRTC board, VRE board, what has been the interest from them to say, hey, we want Caroline to join? I guess because we've been bringing this up, I think, and I'm not sure how this got brought back up, but we've been bringing this back up, and I'm wondering, is this something that was pressed by, you know, the Spotsylvania, Prince William, the counties along that line going to Northern Virginia?
Well,
do they have like, hey, we want Caroline? I mean, is this something they're saying, hey, we want Caroline, that we have a strong interest?
We've had one conversation with our operations board, and it was to brief them on the discussions we've had with Caroline County staff and the expression of interest from Caroline County. So we approached the operations board on the near-term, the prospects of Caroline County joining, and what the operations board, and again, they're representing the jurisdictions that are members of VRE now, and PRTC and MVTC. They expressed some reservations relative to it, because again, it requires unanimity on certain things like issuing of bonds, and as service is added, the payment of, and making sure that as we add service, that everyone's paying their share of the extra cost associated with it. And so really they encouraged us to really talk more, to go back down, which is we're doing now, is to talk to you about some of the issues associated with it, to get a gauge from Caroline County, how interested is Caroline County in joining us. I think that it'd be fair to represent that the operations board is open to discussion, but they have some reservations associated with it. When this summer we were doing a long-range planning effort, and we talked about, not Caroline County specifically, but not only Caroline County, but extensions on the other line, the Manassas line, down into Fauquier County and perhaps beyond, and is that something they would be interested in? And what they expressed is, we have a lot of needs already in the areas that we're in. And they want me to focus on meeting those needs, and when those are met, then we can look at perhaps extending out beyond that. But they see, they value, frankly, they see it as a very valuable system that they want to maximize where they're at now in their jurisdictions before we look too hard at extending out and extending ourselves beyond our capabilities. And so I think that's a good expression of where they are on the issue.
Okay. It was the last locality to join, was that Spotsylvania?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the smallest? I mean, you've got some independent cities in there, Fredericksburg, correct? I mean, you've got some.
Manassas Park is probably the smallest.
The smallest. But as far as population density, I mean, all the population densities in those areas are.
Well, Manassas Park has, relatively high population density because it's a small town, but it's got apartments and houses, single-family houses in it. There's not a lot of open space in Manassas Park.
But wouldn't that be kind of I'm just thinking from a perspective of ridership and stuff, wouldn't that be something you guys look at as far as serving the people? Where the highest concentrations of population density would be?
Yes. The stations that we operate in, and I've only been here a little over a year, so bear with me, are largely, to my knowledge, except for Spotsylvania, all the other stations were original stations. They were stations that were identified 20 years ago as we're going to have a station in this location. We are working with Prince William County to add a new station, and that's somewhat of a daunting task, but we are adding a new station in Prince William County. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but when VRE was set up, the intent was to have a station at Manassas Park, using them as an example. Also from Fredericksburg as an example, that's what the end of the line was. And then over time, there was a lot more and more people as Spotsylvania grew, as more and more people grew, chose to live in Spotsylvania County, more and more riders were going to the Fredericksburg station. And over time, and again, I wasn't here, but over time, Spotsylvania felt it was important that they have their own station and join VRE, and so the agreement was opened up. Spotsylvania was added to it, and Spotsylvania agreed as part of that to build the station that is now being built and to help pay for the extension down into Spotsylvania County. And that station's about to be under construction. So I want to say it was like 5 years ago that they joined. So within 5 years, they're now in the process of building a station.
So what was the last station, just out of curiosity, going along, what was the last station before Spotsylvania?
That was built?
Yes.
Again, I think they were all built about the same time when it opened in 92, wasn't it, Al? Yeah, 92. I think they all pretty much opened at the same time in 1992 when it first opened.
Okay. Now, as far as the subsidy that Caroline, if they were to join, would pay to VRE, we've got something from staff that says, and I just want to clarify, we've got something from staff that says $107,000. Is that based on ridership? Because I have minutes here from a VRE meeting, and it says Mr. Harf stated Caroline's additional $150,000 would be beneficial to VRE operations. So is it $107,000 or is it $150,000?
That citation was a combination of the contributions for the PRTC organization and the VRE organization. So the $107,000 was an estimate of what the Caroline subsidy for VRE alone would be based on the survey that was done in October of 2012. We do a survey every October, so it's conceivable that the survey, which we're now processing will show that Caroline's ridership number went from 84 to some number higher than that we're awaiting the survey results. But each year, that survey winds up governing the allocation of the subsidy for VRE alone. PRTC subsidy by the founding ordinance for PRTC is allocated on the basis of the distribution of fuel tax revenue receipts by jurisdiction. So that's the difference between the 150 and the 107.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thomas, that's all for now. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Seeley?
I want to go back to the one question, and is the Spotsylvania track cost, the 8 miles, $33 million, what percentage is Spotsylvania picking up for track and for the train station? I mean,
Spotsylvania, yeah, I'm sorry.
rough order, Magnum, not,
Spotsylvania is picking up all the cost for the station. Let me back up. Spotsylvania is paying for the local share of the cost for the station and the parking lot. I think the station itself is like $8 million, and the parking lot, I'm not sure. The parking lot is really, Spotsylvania is taking care of all of that, so all the contracts for the parking lot, Spotsylvania is dealing with. For the station, there was a state grant, I believe. Was there a federal grant involved? No, not for the station. And so they're paying the local match. Let's say half of the cost is coming from Spotsylvania for the station, rough order of magnitude. I believe on the track work, it's a combination of, again, grants, both federal and state grants. And the state grant, excuse me, the local match is paid for by all of the system, not just Spotsylvania. And I think that's because it's a long-term commitment that we made to the CSX to eventually do a third track section the whole length. And so the track work is shared by all of the member jurisdictions. I don't believe there was an extra cost for the track extension that Spotsylvania had to bear. I believe that's the case, and I'll let Al correct me if I'm wrong.
Not a correction, just a point of clarification. Mr. Allen pointed out that there are certain types of investments like the track work and the rolling stock that are so-called system expenses, which means that they're a collective responsibility. And then there are the types of investments like stations and parking facilities that are the individual jurisdiction where the station resides responsibility. But in both cases, VRE and PRTC make real proactive efforts to identify sources of federal and state funds that can be used to defray the costs of both the system investments and the individual jurisdictional investments. So this distinction between a collective responsibility, which is the system investment, and a individual jurisdictional responsibility doesn't necessarily translate into a 100% locally funded type of investment. So the station and the parking facility that Spotsylvania is responsible for is being paid for by a combination of grants and local funds, the 2.1% motor fuels tax.
and I guess that's what takes me back to the Caroline line, because the 20 mile of track is again, as using your words, would have to be probably financed differently due to the fact that it's so far off the beaten path for the Northern Virginia localities. The interest is probably a lot lower.
Yeah, and let me expand on that, because that's a very good point. I think that's a key point, in that it is such a long distance between stations. And the other is the ridership potential is very, I think in the long term there will be the development, but in the short term there's not the population density down here to really support that. So the standard model that we've been using of again, the number of riders getting on at Spotsylvania County is divided up by where the jurisdictions are coming from, but the incremental cost of extending down to Fredericksburg is very small given compared to the incremental cost of extending all the way down to Caroline County. So that's the reason for the difference of how we would have to approach something like this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Underwood?
I was just, so the jurisdictional cost, the jurisdictional cost, then, you said there are sources to assist with that, state and federal fund. Is that correct?
Well, no, the jurisdictional sources, I presume, would be the revenue that would come from the gas tax, the 2.1% gas tax. What we do is, what Al was referring to is when we have a cost for a station, we look for state and federal grants to reduce that cost to the local jurisdictions. And then the local jurisdiction revenue would pay for the remainder.
So in actuality, then the system expense would, if you extended the line to Caroline, then the expenses to the other northern counties would increase then, basically.
Well, on the specifics on the actual extension, because of what I was just referring to of the distance and the number of people that would likely use a service, we would have to do it differently for Caroline County just because of those unique issues.
Correct.
Once the rest of the system costs, like Caroline County's share of operating the train, from Spotsylvania in would be based on the percentage of riders from Caroline County relative to the percentage of riders from all the other jurisdictions, which right now is 86 people. That would go up, obviously, but.
So your system cost basically then is the rail cars, the operations costs, and those types of.
Yeah, the rail cars, things like the rail cars, the track infrastructure on most of the track, and then the operating cost and maintenance costs.
Okay. Now you mentioned you had a bond that you were getting ready to extinguish.
Yeah.
How much was that bond?
I want to say it was like a $100 million bond. It's about to be retired, and it went for purchasing rail cars and locomotives.
Over what period of time did you?
I want to say it was 15 years. Again, I apologize. I just got here a year ago, but I want to say it's about a 15-year. It was perhaps 10, 15 years. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Akers.
Thank you. A couple of things I have. Number one, we talked early on about what the monies could be used for, the revenue from the fuel tax could be used for. Can you explain some of those to us as to what they can be used for other than transportation, road issues, and things of that nature?
I'll cite some examples for you from other jurisdictions. The city of Fredericksburg has used it for traffic signal work. They've used it for sidewalk improvements. They've used it for secondary road improvements. They've used it, there have been instances where monies have been used for staff expenses associated with the transportation departments and public works departments of the individual jurisdictions. The city of Fredericksburg uses a portion of that motor fuels tax for a locally sponsored transit service that I think you're acquainted with, FRED. So the FRED service is paid for in part by 2.1% motor fuels tax revenues. So any qualifying transportation purpose is fair game, and the way that process works is the member jurisdiction will pass a resolution expressing an interest in having a specified amount of their 2.1% motor fuels tax revenue used for a particular transportation purpose. It then comes before the PRTC board. There's a need for a concurrence, and in the 15 years that I have been present at PRTC, there's never been an instance where someone asked for the use of the motor fuels tax revenue that was denied by the board.
How about funding of school buses? I've heard that that's something that it could be used for.
That is uncharted territory. I would have to explore that possibility further.
Okay. I don't know where that came from, but I know I've read that somewhere the school buses could be funded. Where does that come from?
Okay. Mr. Parton says he believes we were told that before, so we'll double check.
Okay. All right. So if we could just check that out to see if that is something, because that's a big cost for the county. Is there a percentage established by the PRTC board, an exact percentage? Let's say, for instance, Caroline County, and looking through the information that we have in our board packet, there's a difference in the revenue that you say will be generated through the fuel tax in Caroline County, and then what maybe the Commissioner of Revenue has provided based on the number of gallons that...
I'd be more inclined to trust your own homegrown estimate, but we did not want to overstate, and so we relied on a per capita basis for estimating the fuel tax revenue, and so our estimate at the time that we furnished it was something a little north of $2 million, and yours was something in the neighborhood of $6 million.
That is correct.
I can't attest to the $6 million number, but I know that our estimate was a per capita number, and it's probably understated.
I got you. So what percentage of that, again, what percentage of that, let's say $6 million, would PRTC take off the top, and VRE is still based on the ridership, so it's not based on the amount of money that's collected?
Yeah, the The portion that PRTC, quote-unquote, takes off the top is to simply defray the administrative cost of the commission, which is a relatively small sum. And so the last estimate that we did back in 2012 was a $36,000 estimate.
$36,000 for PRTC and
And
107,000